close our eyes and take 6 slow, deep, relaxing breaths. With every inhale, we breathe in more light, and with every exhale, we relax more deeply. We feel all the tension draining away from the body and the mind. We just allow gravity to take it. And it becomes increasingly easy to let go completely. We picture ourselves on the top of a beautiful mountain, and we are in the center of a circular grove of trees. And inside of our circle, a beautiful bonfire is blazing forth. And it's lighting this grove up with a sacred golden light. And we recognize this light as being the light of perfect love and perfect trust. And it easily burns away everything that is unlike itself, leaving us feeling safe and happy, peaceful, joyous, and very powerful. We dedicate this time that we are now spending together to our celestial Father, Mother, all of the highest guides and teachers, angels, and we ask that they lead us as we walk upon the way so that we can grow to be happier and healthier and more peaceful, more loving, and more successful people. Thank you very much, and together we say blessed be.
Blessed be.
Okay, so we were talking, you reminded me last time we were talking about effectiveness, and we were talking about how the different energy centers in the body hold different frequencies. Well, in different systems of magic have different currents of energy. So our system of magic has its current, and the OTO has its current, and the Golden Dawn has its current, and the Gardnerians have their current, and the Alexandrians have their current, and everybody's plugged into a specific current of energy. But there's also different frequencies of energy. So within each current of energy that you're working, and you, when you're doing solitary magic, you have your own current of energy, right? And then the guides or whatever that you work with, the different beings within the different inner planes that you work with, they are going to be working on different currents. But within those, within every current, there's different vibrations. There's different levels of vibration. So, and those different levels of vibration are like a prism effect. So the current is basically easily, you can think of it as being split into different prism depending on what you're doing. And so for instance, if you're working on prosperity magic, you're going to be at a different ray of light, so to speak, within your current. And if you're working on love magic, you're going to be in a different prismatic ray. And if you're in a different, that's why different colors work for different intentions, different planets, different. You need a new pen? So, and all of that is based on the law of correspondence. So on, we've got one. Yep. So, from a Hermetic point of view, if you look in all the Hermetic teachings, all is one. Okay, so there is one. It's a very almost a pantheistic worldview where God is all encompassing, and every emanation of the of God's creation is is an emanation of the one. So, or an individuation of that one. So, even though that's true in a cosmological sense that we're all one, in practical terms, from magical perspective, we are still part of the many. So there's a point at which you can follow any current or any ray of light into its source, obviously, and then you find the one. But for practical magic, we have to still look in terms of, we're not going to just say, well, you don't want to necessarily pray to the one to get you what you want. Instead, you want to align yourself with the actual ray of light and which within the current that you're working, so that you can be more effective. So that's why we have the 7 days of the week are sacred to different planets. That's very helpful, because each of those planetary energies are more easily accessible on each day of the week. The different phases of the moon, for instance, we have, we talk about the waxing and the waning and all of that sort of stuff. Those are dealing with different parts of whatever current you're working with. You can even get down into where you're using different gemstones. They are focusing different particular parts, rays within the current that you're working. So if even though an Alexandrian might use the same herbs and stones that a DCW witch might use, they're still kind of operating on different currents. So the way we approach it might be a little differently, even though we're going for a similar result. So it's really important to understand that, because what happens within the craft communities is everybody's starting to get into this, we're all one, and it's all just made up anyway, and it doesn't really matter, do whatever you want, because it just doesn't matter. Well, I can understand why they're saying that, and on a certain level, they're right, that it doesn't matter, that all you need is a good intention and you can do whatever you want. But at the same time, if you take the time to honor the current that you're working in, and use that to its fullest effect, you're going to have a much easier time of getting a result. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes.
So. And that's not really what I wanted to talk about, but I just wanted to talk about how the different emanations, there's different levels. So within the chakras, like you were talking about, sometimes when an energy is centered in the navel area, it's part of the power center, and so if you are trying to operate magically, sometimes from this navel center, trying to force your will upon a particular situation, you're going to have a different result than if you allow that energy to rise up into one of these higher centers. But then the way, since you're changing the ray that you're working with, the ray of light that you're working with within your current, the way you approach it needs to be different as well, and the results that you're going to get are going to be a little bit different also. So what I did want to talk about I want to talk about the heart-centered magic today, because it's very important to understand that none of the centers are bad or wrong, but sometimes it's the amount of time that it takes to get the result and the amount of satisfaction that you get from the result that you receive is different. So when you're working with one of the lower centers, trying to effect change in the world, you're working more with your own personal will, and you're working with very what I used to call sorcery. I'm going to make it happen, I'm going to make it happen, I'm going to make it happen. And that's fine. It's just that tends to cause a little bit of tension. You tend to not be very happy unless you get the exact result that you asked for. Whereas if you're working in one of the upper centers, and like what we're talking about today with more of a heart-centered approach, your approach changes quite dramatically sometimes, because it's not that you're not doing the footwork. It's not that you don't want the chocolate brown Mercedes anymore, but the way that you approach the chocolate brown Mercedes when it's a heart-centered thing is very, very different, because you are understanding why it is that you want it more, rather than just that you want it. It's not so much that you want it because it's pretty and that's all you care about. It's what does that represent to you. The chocolate brown Mercedes might represent something very different to very many people. It might represent to one person the idea of luxury. To another person, it might represent the idea of financial freedom. To another person, it might represent the idea of a long-standing desire for love. It might represent an actual self-love. So there could be many, many reasons why you want a chocolate brown Mercedes. But with a heart-centered Magick, it's not so concerned with the thing itself, but what its core principle or representation is, what the germ of the idea is, what its true desire is. So
fulfills within you.
Yeah, what is the essence of that desire? What is, when you distill it down to its essence? What is it? When you take a bunch of rose petals, fresh rose petals, and you can take a vat of rose petals and you distill it down into the pure rose essential oil. You're getting, it's a very tiny little bottle of essential oil that is much more powerful than one of those little petals was. And it will last a lot longer, and it won't die, if it's kept in the right conditions in that dark bottle in a cool, dark place. And you can revisit it, and you can use it for all kinds of things. It's much more versatile than the rose itself. And the same thing is with your desires. If you can distill your desire down to what its essence is, then you're going to be able to have a stronger, more powerful effect on the world. But also, you're going to be able to understand that the appearance is different than what you thought it was. This little bottle of rose oil is much more powerful than the rose petal, but you would never know had somebody not taught you that this is actually bunches of roses. This little bottle is bunches of roses. So in a heart-centered approach, a lot of times when you get the thing that you want, it may look different, but it's actually much more than what you asked for in the first place. So it's very important when we're dealing with this center versus this center. And again, neither one is wrong. But when you're dealing with this center, you're actually, it's much more powerful, just like the rose oil is. But you have to be able to be open to the fact that when you get it, it's going to look different than what you thought it was. And that doesn't mean that it won't be a chocolate brown Mercedes. But remember, the chocolate brown Mercedes was not the actual goal. The goal was whatever we said. The goal was luxury, was this, was that. So the chocolate brown Mercedes in this lower center approach, you might have really expensive car payments, but you got it. Whereas this centered approach, since you're doing the I've always wanted this, a life of luxury, let's say that's what your essence is, you might, I don't know, win the lottery, and the chocolate brown Mercedes is just a little part of it. You know what I'm saying? But you're going to get much more with it. Or, which is also often the case with a heart-centered approach, by the time it comes to you, you realize, I didn't really want a chocolate brown Mercedes. And so I don't want that form, but I'm happy with the actual form that it came in, which is whatever. So if it was for instance, a symbol of self-love, maybe by the time it came back to you, you got something much better than what you thought it should have been. Does that kind of make sense? The other thing too, with a heart-centered approach, the way that the results come to you is often much more gentle as well. A lot of times when you're doing magic from this point of view versus this point of view, it may not look as dramatic to you. Instead, it seeps in through the cracks and it permeates all of your being. And it oftentimes, by the time it happens, it seems as if it's always been there. Whereas these other ones, it's like a temporary glamour almost. It's hard to keep it up because it's just been so much personal will that you are enforcing upon the physical world, that it's very hard to keep up that kind of energy. And so a lot of times those results might seem somewhat dramatic, but they're also more fleeting, and they're harder to keep going. Whereas this work up here, since it's more in line with what your life's purpose is, the results tend to be eternal on some level. Because what you're doing is like when Eli talks about the fact that he talks about, well, we're wanting to do this magic, not because he'll start you out with, well, what do you want? You want a typewriter, you want this, you want that, you want a computer. Back then it was a typewriter. But that's just to show you the ropes, to show you how it works. Because ultimately, when we get into our heart's desire, what we're doing is we are actually transforming our whole lives. We are actually contributing to the evolution of our soul. Whereas these lower energies, when we're enforcing our will upon situations, we are sometimes thwarting our soul's evolution because we're getting stuck in forms that may or may not serve us. Does that kind of make sense? So a lot of times people think of when they hear something like that, they say, "Oh, that's such a cop-out." So basically, you're saying that magic doesn't work. Not at all. It works very, 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 very powerfully, and usually you'll get what you want because usually when you're coming from a heart-centered approach, you have been in contact with what we call your mental teacher, so that you've been working out what it is that you want based on where your soul's evolution is, and the things that you want are actually tools to help you grow. So you do usually get what you ask for, but a lot of times people that aren't involved with this sort of thing, like we are, and don't understand the totality of what the craft can be for us as a worldview and as a way of living and as a way of spiritual unfoldment, they are thinking, well, I'm going to get a lot of goodies, and I can use magic in order to feed my greed, and that's not what we're here to do at all. So when you are working in the method that I'm talking about, when you're doing your meditations and you're closing your eyes and you're relaxing your body, what you want to do is when you start to think about your goal is see where it is resonating in your body. And if it's resonating down here in your belly or even lower, it doesn't mean that that's wrong. And it doesn't mean that you should try to shut it down. It's a good thing. It means that you should try to lift it up and see if you can at least simultaneously, in addition to these lower energies, feel an opening in the heart. Because if you can physiologically feel the opening in the heart area, that means that heart, that this place right in your physical body has a correlation to your aura, to part of the inner planes and part of your astral self that is more connected to your superconscious and to your soul. And these higher centers do as well. But that's a topic for another time. So when you're opening this heart center, what you'll notice is as you're focusing on your goal, oftentimes you'll get much clearer inspiration as to what to do, and where to go, and how this goal relates to your evolution and why you wanting it so desperately. Remember, if it's a true desire, I don't really necessarily say that you put it there any more than you put your eyes there or that you put your fingerprint there. It's something that is part of who you are because it's there to be fulfilled, because it's part of the hungering of growth, of just like with any kind of evolutionary process, there's a will to evolve, and part of the will to evolve spiritually comes from a desire, and that desire, like we were talking about with that prismic effect, has all kinds of manifestations in your life, and it can look very mundane. It can look very, very mundane. But when you're open here, you'll understand that a lot of those mundane desires have very, very concrete correlations to something much, much more spiritual. And that's why when people say, well, do you want to do practical magic or do you want to grow spiritually? I don't think, that to me, that's what the cop-out is. Because they're so intertwined. You wanting to have more money is just as spiritual as somebody wanting to, open their third eye. There's nothing more or less spiritual for you wanting to have a love relationship in your life to somebody wanting to astral project. There's nothing more spiritual or less spiritual for you wanting to have a new home than to having somebody, wanting wanting world peace. I mean, it's really, I'm sorry, it's all equally valid as long as where your perspective is evolution. Because what tends to happen is if you're following your, it's like here is a big magnet right in your chest. And when there's a very, it's a real magnetic energy that moves out through your entire electromagnetic field in your aura. And when and all of the centers have a magnetism, but there's a special type of magnetism that comes from the heart, because it's the gateway between the two selves. It's the gateway between the higher self and the so-called lower self. So when you're able to do your magical work from this center, you tend to, in my experience, have a stronger magnetic pull for the people and the events and the circumstances and the physical things than you might realize. In fact, it can be very, very quick. It can be very, very quick if you're opening your heart to your own soul while you're doing your work. Does that make sense? Kind of. So when you're doing lower center work, you're dealing with a type of magnetism, but you're not connected to the universal mind as well. I mean, you sort of are, but it's just so many times removed.
Levels down.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's just so many levels removed that, for all intents and purposes, it's just self-will, and so you don't have any oomph to it. It's like an like an electric magnet versus one of those horseshoe magnets. The one is plugged into a huge source, and it can really pull. Whereas the other one, is fine as long as you're trying to get something out of, the filings out of the sand, right? But so the more but then when you're trying to do magic from the higher centers, it's harder for you to be as centered in the practical, because it's sort of farther removed from your needs. So that's why I like the heart, because you're able to handle the practical things magically in your life, but then they reflect what it is that you're dealing with spiritually. So it's a wonderful place to live from. Especially live from magically, is this area, because you're not off in the clouds, but you're also not stuck in the lower astral realms either.
It's kind of like that happy middle ground between the mental and the mortal world.
Absolutely.
Where you can manifest
absolutely
your desire. Because when I think about our lower selves, a very primal, very kind of base level desire. You said, I want it because I want it.
Yeah.
When you think of the higher level, it's like it's almost too lofty.
Too altruistic.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And what I've noticed is the heart center tends to simultaneously open everything below and above it. So, but that's my experience, and other people will have their own experiences with this. The other thing too is you don't have to change the methodologies of what you're doing. You don't have to not use your athame, you know what I mean, or whatever it is that you're doing. You don't have to change your methodology to come from this center versus this center because it's so close. Whereas some of these higher centers, the methodologies don't make sense anymore. They're just that because you're working on different goals, different purposes, and it's not that they're bad, and there's a place for it, but it stops becoming so practical. So what I recommend is that you remember how we were talking about your list, your goal list. We were talking about that where you can write everything. Anybody do that?
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Isn't that amazing? You can. It's just like it's so fast. It's like a phone
It
book.
goes like this, and it goes like this, and it goes.
I know. It's amazing. Well, you can just do something just that you can keep doing that, and then add this, and see what happens when you start to physiologically open your heart and connect your heart with it. And notice how it changes the energy, and when you start asking yourself, well, why do I want this thing? And just ask your heart, why do I want this thing? What does it represent? What does it really represent to me?
Really want this, or is it something else that I really want?
Or is it, well, and it's not even so much, it could be something else, but it's not even necessarily something else, but it's what's the essential oil once I distill it down, what does it really become? Yeah. And so then what happens is you think, well, so I'm sort of doing a spell for, a new home, but actually what I want is security. I want to feel secure. I want, not that home is going to necessarily make you feel secure, but if that's what, but that's why you want it. But see, if you didn't understand why you wanted it, you might get the home, but you might not get the
security.
You understand? Yeah. And the home starts representing something other than security, then therefore you go into foreclosure, or the roof caves in, or whatever, because you forgot to align it with your purpose. But if you realize that the home is an extension of my desire for security, well then, how is it that I just was able to pay off my mortgage? Well, because I decided that I needed security. So, you know what I'm saying? So it's a completely different approach then. It's not that you don't get your house anymore. It's just that the house is in alignment with your true desires rather than at odds with them.
Well, I just thought, I was trying to think, what's something I want right now? Oh, okay. I know something that I want is I'd like to get some storage cabinets for the new house to put some items in. And I started thinking, well, why do I want that? Mm-hmm. Well, because I want to feel organized. Well, what does organized make me feel? Well, it makes me feel in control of my life. And then I just went, whoa.
Well, but that's not necessarily a bad thing.
No, but I just mean, I'm still going to get the storage cabinet, of course, but then now I'm like, well, gosh, now I really want to meditate on
control.
What's the desire of being in control of my life.
Well, and maybe there's another layer under the control. Mm-hmm. You want to maybe feel safe, or you want to feel whatever it is.
Yes, right. Relax because things are in their place.
At peace, absolutely,
right, sure.
absolutely.
Sure.
So then all of a sudden, your desire for the cabinets, if they represent peace, the kind of cabinets that you end up choosing or manifesting are going to maybe look real different,
right.
and be much more satisfying to you,
and come about in a less forced way of rather than just, I just have to get some because I have to get them there. Now
right.
It's a different approach.
And then also, not only that is then rather than just accumulating more stuff, then the stuff that you accumulate through these methods have a talismanic property, because every time you open that cabinet, you're basking in the peace that you manifested, whatever it is, rather than just, oh my God, I have another thing.
Right.
because sometimes too many things start to really cramp your style too. But if the thing is a talisman for something else, then the thing is actually very empowering to you. Right? It's just like my Mercedes, the Mercedes story. I don't know if you guys ever follow my my podcast, but the Mercedes thing it's turned into this big deal, but with a lot of listeners, and which it's very cute. But it's true. The Mercedes thing really, the Mercedes is a joy to me. It feels like it's every time I get in the car, it's just such a great joy, and as a result, it's always been a source of joy rather than sometimes a car can be a source of annoyance. You know what I mean? So if I went for just the Mercedes, which I didn't go for the Mercedes to tell you the truth, the Mercedes came for me. But if I had just gone for the Mercedes without understanding that it represents joy, then it would have been it could possibly have been a cause of problems for me rather than a source of great pleasure. So when you're dealing with this, what I'm calling heart-centered magic, which sounds very fluffy, real fluff bunny-ish, and people get so mad at that. It's fun. It almost makes me want to get more fluffy because it gets people so pissed off. But that's just the little devil in me. But it's really not fluffy. It's actually quite powerful. It's actually very esoteric. It's actually very sound. It's a very sound magical principle that whichever ray whichever ray you are choosing to work with is going to the result is going to be very attached to it. So what you get out of what you get out of anything, what you put into it. So that's why any kind of sorcery that has any sort of self-will to especially to a negative degree, it never bodes well for the results. The results always end up being more of a curse than a blessing. Whereas the opposite is true if you're doing magic from one of these other higher rays, where you're actually connecting to a greater part of yourself than your personality or than your ego, because there's so many different. When you meditate and you work magically and you work any of this stuff for long enough, you realize there's so many different inner planes. There's so many different layers of reality that is separate and distinct from this physical reality. But by the same token, there's very many different layers of who you are on the inner planes, and there's parts of you that you don't even know exist and that you've probably not become acquainted with that are much, much bigger and much more powerful than the you that you think you are. And I'm using you collectively. I mean you meaning us. So the more you're able to start accessing the you that is the spiritual giant, the you with a capital Y or the self with a capital S, the more power is at your disposal. But at the same time, that the more you're accessing the greater parts of yourself, that part of yourself isn't kidding. It's not playing games. It's serious about why it's here. So the lower parts of you where you're playing magic, it's almost as if it's almost as if it doesn't matter to the higher self, and it'll kind of almost leave you alone to do that because it really doesn't make much of a difference in the scheme of things. And eventually you'll get kicked up to where you're supposed to be. But it's like it's a matter of it's almost like you're wasting time doing a lot of self-will, doing these goals that are so divorced from your true purpose here on this earth. But when you're starting to say, well, wait a minute, I want to be truly engaged in a more powerful me, and I want to have real powerful results. I want things that really work. Well, then you're going to have to start accessing the parts of yourself that are much, much more connected to the greater you. and to the superconscious you, which is actually connected to a greater part of the universe in the universal mind. And when you start to think in these terms, and you start to see how big of a person you really are and how powerful you are, it's almost disconcerting at first. It can be very, very scary because it's just so different. It's sort of like a psychedelic experience when you know, it's like the first time somebody drops acid and they, oh, this will be fun, and then it's just like, oh shit, what the fuck, you know, this is too much. This is make it stop, because it's so different. The reality is so different all of a sudden than what you thought it could possibly be. Well, the same thing is true without having to deal with drugs, with magic, with anything like this. When you start to access the deeper parts of who you really are, they can be so different from the ego that you think you are. It can be quite scary. And that's why we recommend that you meditate on a daily basis so that you are priming yourself to gently integrate with these parts of yourself. And that way when you're starting to operate magically in these realms, you have more of an even footing in this. Does that make sense? So that you can actually access some very, very powerful energy. And it's not an external energy, it's an internal energy. It's the core essence of who you are. But who you are is much more accessible through the heart than it is from the solar plexus or from the base. And it's not that those are bad things. It's, in fact, the Kundalini, it's like if you go far down enough, you actually get higher. I mean, if you go way down into the base of your spine, you're actually going to a different realm altogether. It's sort of like somebody was talking about how the Buddhist monks and different shaman and different medicine men and women who are in states where they're able to really affect change, like they're able to change their body temperature or their heart rhythms, or they're able to make rain and that kind of thing. You know how we talk about you get it, and you have to go into a deep state of relaxation in order to access these states, right? Well, what happens is they're so ultra focused, and we should be too, that you get to such a deep level of relaxation that you start going into hyperdrive. When they start to measure their brain waves, it goes from the alpha and it goes way down to theta, and it might even go down to toward the delta really slow, and then all of a sudden it goes into gamma, and it gets so focused, so hyper focused that it speeds way up. But you can't get to those gamma level brain waves unless you go down through the deeper levels of meditation. You can't just go higher and higher through waking states of consciousness to reach the higher levels. So the same thing is true with the real deep chakra down deep. That actually you can get way high going to that depth. But that's not what we're talking about today. So I'm not discounting the lower chakras. I'm just talking about the difference between self-will and accessing the superconscious mind. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So, like for instance, when you're let's look at the just some real old-fashioned witchcraft kind of trappings. Like, say you wanted to do a spell on someone. Say you wanted to heal somebody, or we're just going to keep it positive. You're not going to do anything negative, right? So what do we ask for? We usually ask for a lock of their hair, some nail trimmings, a picture, maybe their signature. We want something. We want an object link, right? It's much more helpful. Well, the thing is if you're at the right consciousness, then that object link becomes a hologram for that person. It's holographic. It becomes them. You know, whether it's, you know, even that picture, even if it doesn't have any of their DNA on it, that picture all of a sudden becomes holographic, and you are able to then access a part of your mind that is connected to a part of their mind, so that you're able to effect change. It's like you've found this little wormhole through space, and you're able to actually effect change on them, even if they're on the other side of the world, right? Okay. Another thing that you can deal with here is time travel. This is very important in magical work, especially if you're dealing with this heart-based stuff. The future is a very, very, very powerful place, because it's filled with infinite possibilities. Well, the lower centers of the mass consciousness right now are very, very keen on having us go into specific futures. They, you know, even the ones that quote unquote care about the earth, they are very keen on the fact that that global warming is going to destroy the earth. This is, you know, these things are going to happen. There's going to be, you know, calamities, and there's going to be world wars, and there's going to be these sorts of things. And they've got a lot invested in that. Well, the good news is that it's not as powerful as heart-based approach. So you only need a few people that are working on these higher centers to overcome all of that, because it's just not as powerful. So if you're thinking in terms of the future, if you look at the future, what you can do is you can get into a very deep meditative state, and you can call up a part of your future, and you can just ask the future you to come and sit in front of you and send you energy from the future, and you send it energy from here, and you link up and you say, well, what's the high, and you both get into agreement, what's the highest possible future for us to have? And that is much more powerful than sitting and bemoaning the idea that there's going to be all of these horrible things happening. And what you do is, when enough people do that, and it only takes a few, it doesn't take that many people working on operations like this, is you kind of short circuit these other lower minds that are trying to
They're
focusing on their own agenda, about how bad the future's going to be. And the thing is remember how I said that the magic from the higher centers just sort of seeps in, sort of unnoticed? Mm-hmm. Then the future starts to take shape, and people think, well, of course it's going to happen like that. Well, it's always, you know, of course it's supposed to have happened like this. It's not like Jesus comes down from the sky or something and everybody's saved. It's much more subtle than that. It's just when that light starts to trickle down into the reality, as the reality sets in, it starts to become accepted as self-evident that, of course, it's always supposed to have been like this. And then they'll bitch about something else, and that's fine. And those people will just be bitching no matter what's happening. There were people bitching during the best economies we've ever had, about taxes and stuff. So they're always going to bitch, but. Do you see what I'm saying? And you can go the other direction. You can go back in time. You could go back to a time when you felt regret. And this is a very powerful thing to do, especially in regards to one of your practical goals. So let's think about it. So you've got any goal, any random goal, practical goal that somebody might have.
Pay off a credit card? Okay,
pay off a credit card. Great. So let's just randomly say $8,500. You want to pay off $8,500 in debt. And to your lower mind, it's going to be really hard, and you don't have that kind of money, and where is it going to come from? And it's never going to happen, and we're going to have to work really hard. You're going to have to get 3 more jobs, and then you'll get it done. Well, if you take it out of that realm and you take it up here, you can do another little operation. That's go back in time when you made those debts, and you go do the same thing that you find the past you, and you sit in front of one another and you make an agreement that that those debts didn't happen, and you forgive the past you for doing that. And the past you makes a new choice, and they don't create the debt. Okay, that seems like, well, what's that going to do? Oh, a lot, because then all of a sudden your deep mind says, oh, I don't have a debt. So then what happens? Your reality starts to reflect. So every time you see that debt, you remember, oh no, that's not real. That's not really there. It didn't really happen. That's just an illusion. You know, and again, that doesn't mean that you don't pay it off. That you but your motivation for paying it off becomes much more settled. It becomes much more calm, because what you've done is you've changed the past. You've forgiven the past. What happens is when you forgive something, a lot of times you don't forgive it and heal it. You just forgive it because I don't know. Oh, I forgive you, but you don't really actually let it go. But if you really forgive something, it disappears. It didn't really happen. I mean, yeah, you forgive and forget. Right.
It doesn't exist for you anymore.
It doesn't exist for you anymore. And so if you continually keep forgiving, you'll notice that debt gets paid off very, very quickly. You'll notice that you tend to feel like going straight into the bank and making a credit card payment in person, because it feels even more powerful, because you know it's going to get done. You know it's going to post that day, and you'll notice that you go there maybe 4 or 5 times a week and just give an extra $50 or $100, and little by little this unburdens over and over, and you just keep going back and working with that past you. And keep forgiving one another, and just making the agreement that debt never happened, and then pretty soon that debt never happened.
And you're finally relaxed because you've experienced the forgiveness in your past.
Absolutely,
you have that now within yourself, and so you feel more relaxed instead of the person who racks up $8,500 and hates themselves for doing it.
And if the past time travel thing doesn't appeal to you, you can do it another way. You can do a thing we've talked about before, where it's like an elemental kind of thing, where you go and you see, well, which part of myself is in charge of debt. You call up that part of yourself, and you see what it looks like, and you see what it's wearing, and you see and you see what kind of expression it has on its face, and what kind of habits it has, and you start to have a rapport with it, and you start sending it lots of love, and you start saying, what are you trying to do for me? Because it's trying to help you in some way. Everything is always trying to help you inside of you, whether you realize it or not. And you ask, well, what are you trying to do for me? And you listen, and you realize whatever it is, the reason why it's giving you debt maybe is because it's trying to help you feel better by having pretty things or something like that. And you say, well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. Would you be willing to find a way of helping me get pretty things without debt? And it'll say, well, sure. And then you say, well, let's work on this together. Why don't you become my luxury master, and that can be your thing. You're in charge of luxury, but let's agree that there's no more debt involved with that we only do it when we have extra money above and beyond our bills. And then they say, okay. And then little by little over time, when you start to work with this part of yourself, you realize that debt disappears, and that in the future, that part of you that was such a weakness becomes a real big strength, because then it's always realizing, oh, I see, my new job is surplus. I'm supposed to do surplus, not debt.
And look at all these different ways that I can bring luxury to my life.
Yes.
It has nothing to do with debt or even money.
Or money for that matter. Absolutely. So, but again, a sorcerer wouldn't think in these terms, because that's too much. And again, I don't mean sorcerer in that if there's people that identify as sorcerer, and I'm not saying that they're bad or wrong, and that term can mean something very, very positive to so many people. So, but I'm just talking about for us here, we're just naming it something. That when you are dealing from self-will versus from a more universalistic sort of universal perspective, where your heart is open and you're trying to be more integrative and evolutionary in your magic, that you that you approach things differently, and it's much more powerful. And you get results that not only are lovely, but they tend to last. They tend to feel good. They tend to bring you so much pleasure, so much joy, and you're growing spiritually. Not only that, but then invariably all of the things that you're doing, getting, having, being, tend to be more of a blessing to other people and help the whole world on some level or another. If nothing else than just providing a wonderful inspiration. And not only that, but you tend to be in a much better mood, so people like you better, which is always nice. Yeah. So, any questions about that? About the difference in approach between the lower and the middle, the heart versus the gut?
I like the realization of creativity available. It's like a big old bucket of creativity.
Well, and the thing about the creativity that I love too is, if you start to look at people have this idea that you're supposed to turn to magic as a last resort. But if you turn to magic as a first resort, then everything that you're working on energetically. Mm-hmm. And you get to it before it starts to reach form. You're working on a different kind of substance. You're working on a much different substance. The thing about the heart-centered magic is not only do you have to see it, but you've got to feel it. Not only do you have to see, let's say, debt-free, prosperity, freedom, financial freedom, you have to feel financial freedom. You've got to feel it. In fact, it's much more important to feel it, because the feeling will bring about the visualization. You won't have to work hard to picture it. It'll just naturally, spontaneously come, because you're going for the feeling. And the feeling is the magnet. The feeling itself right up here is the magnet that's pulling all of those circumstances your way. And so if you're not feeling it properly, it's kind of dead. It's not working.
And when you do it, it's not only you feel it through your whole body when it.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I like
absolutely.
because it's coming in atomically, it's coming in mist, it's coming in colors.
Absolutely.
It's the way that the heart chakra energy is moving to raise the awareness of the depth and reality of your goal, not just the apparent brown Mercedes.
Absolutely.
That there's lots of spin-offs here.
Absolutely. Those ripples they can last for lifetimes.
Yeah.
That brown Mercedes can be can give you lifetimes of blessing. because it's not the thing, it's what it represented.
Right. I silver broomstick, Corvette, had it in a week.
Yep.
When I first working.
And
had more fun with it than anything I've ever spent money on.
Absolutely, yeah. And when you're it's funny because everything has light in it. I mean, the scientists are starting to find that photons exist. Not starting to. They've realized this for quite a while. But there's a type of light that comes out of all physical substance, right?
Atoms of some sort.
You have some sort of photonic energy.
Yeah.
But that's just, that's just the beginning of it. I mean, there's so many different layers of light that are so far above photons that they don't even know exist, let alone how to measure it, that we are working with. And it's funny because a lot of this, a lot of the physics is is sounding so craft, and it's great. And I'm not saying that that I'm any scientist, because I'm not. But when I hear it, it's just like when they talk about the observer phenomenon, where the observer, the observing the experiment changes the quanta, and the behavior of the quanta change because of how they're being observed, and not only how they're being observed, but the intention of the scientists and what they're expecting, their expectation of what the different particles are going to be doing. Well, duh. I mean, that's what we're talking about. That's absolutely what we're talking about is observing your life, and then being able to focus your intention on that, on whatever that particular quality is. Definitely moves the energy. It changes what's happening. And in group magic, if several people are doing the same observation of that part of your life for you, all at the same time, with the same intention and the same expectation, then it's actually exponentially greater than what you would have had on your own. But the beauty of all of this is that it's not hard. It's just using your imagination. It's just acting as if when you're in your altar room, or wherever you are, when you're at your altar, and you're looking at the part of your life that you're trying to that you're trying to affect change over, even if you can't quite put a picture to it, you can just use a symbol. You can use something symbolic if you can't quite put a picture of what the circumstance will look like. If you're just working, like we were talking about, well, I know the essence of what I want, but I don't quite understand the form yet. Just make a symbol of it. And what you can do is you can just hold that symbol in your mind, and you can fill it up with the energy of whatever ray quality you're looking for, whatever color light is appropriate for it, whatever planetary energy you need, and you can actually absorb it into your heart, and allow all of the different energies of your being to start to reorganize themselves to accommodate that new energy. Does that make sense? So even if you don't know, if you're going at it the opposite way, you don't know that you want a brown Mercedes, but you do understand that you want you understand the essence of your desire, but you don't know the form. Use a symbol. So maybe you say, well, I know that I want financial freedom, but I don't know what that looks like yet. Well, maybe you see a $ with wings on it. And you just fill that with light, fill that with golden light with green specks or something, if that works for you. If those are the two, or maybe you want to work with Jupiter, and you're just going to fill it with that beautiful purple light, and it's just pouring in, and then you just let it go right into your heart, and just let it be absorbed into that part of your being, and just notice what starts to happen. Think of it as a lab. Think of your altar as a laboratory, and you have some sort of hypothesis. You have some sort of idea of what you're doing, but you got to make some notes and keep records and see. Well, we'll see what happens. See what happens. Well, I used a $ with wings on it. I used Jupiter energy. I used purple. I did it on blah blah blah. I did it on Thursday at a Jupiter hour. I did it in the waxing moon, and I held the symbol up. I filled it with the Jupiter color, and I absorbed it into my heart. And then the phone rang, and I got fired from my job. Did it not work? Well, maybe not. Keep going with it. Well, actually, I'm so glad that I got fired from that job, because if I hadn't been in that job, I wouldn't have been looking for a new job, and I didn't know that I was good at sales. And I'm actually in this new position now, making a ton of money, and I'm having the time of my life. And had I not gotten fired from my job, I would still be trying to make peace with this concocted job that I was in that I couldn't stand, right? So sometimes something really weird happens and it seems like it's not working, and it's actually the best thing that ever happened. So don't prejudge, you know.
So in practice, you can either be projecting your desires out through the heart chakra or receiving energy in to help drive your
Right.
desires.
Either. Well, remember the aura, the auric field is projective and magnetic both. So it depends on which or both you want to use, which quality you want to use. You want to be able to necessarily projecting is especially helpful if you're trying to affect change and healing, those kinds of things. But if you're trying to draw something to you, you're probably wanting to do more of a magnetic thing.
Okay.
So you're actually wanting to alter the field, the auric field, so that it's more sympathetic with the particular waves of energy that you're trying to draw.
Okay.
So if you're trying to pull in if you're trying to pull in a result, you definitely, to me, you want to be more magnetic than projective. But you can do both. I mean, and you can experiment and see which works, because
I always think about, that I in my personal magic, that I'm putting my desire, I'm visualizing my desire, and then I'm putting it out there into the universe for it to, manifest here. And so I'm trying to approach this through the idea of the heart-centered. So that makes sense. Sometimes I'm going to want to use it.
And you can, and you might want to experiment with it and just see which things tend to work better for you. Okay. Because it's not that it's wrong to do one or the other, but for me, I would rather I tend to want to set things up in my aura, not necessarily set things up, but to alter my aura, to allow my aura to receive different frequencies, so that I can draw things in better than what I was getting before. So that, to me, that works better, but everybody's different.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm a very projective person by nature, so I think that the magnetic stuff really works for me because it's part of, it's a counterbalance to my personality.
Right. Okay.
Anything else?
Oh, we have cake.
Oh, yay! Well, thank you very much. Blessed be.
Blessed.